The supply of HBAR is diminishing, and we have to talk about this because this could potentially lead to a supply shock. Now, the supply shock is not going to happen tomorrow or next week, but it will happen over time, especially as more and more supply is taken off of exchanges. And we have to address this, we have to talk about it, and we definitely will in this video. But let's first start off with the price chart, because we are just in this extended wedge at this point, and we're just waiting for something to happen. We were kind of in a very similar position going all the way back to like the bear market lows all the way up until roughly we broke out. But I don't think that, this time around, we're just going to have a small little pump like this. And yes, I do think that this was just a small pump. A lot of people will say that, Nick, you're crazy because this thing was up a massive amount, over 900+%. But the reason why I suspect much more out of, a lot of these altcoins is just because we are starting to see the environment change in a big way with ETF announcements, with, institutional grade adoption. We're starting to see regulations. Some of these altcoins like HBAR, for an example, are at the forefront of this. They've been preparing for this. And again, HBAR is definitely a huge one, that I have been talking about and focused on for years. So this is a perfect time to be an HBAR holder because of the environment around crypto. But looking at this, yeah, we still have some work to do. I'm 100% locked in on what's happening with Bitcoin as well during this time, because yes, Bitcoin is still the driver of the car right now in the space. So we need to be very cautious about what happens with Bitcoin. But, I am watching for this thing to break out, because after HBAR officially does break out and we start to clear some of these previous highs, the major two highs that I'm really looking at as clearing is the July highs, and then after that, the all-time highs from this year, which will take us to pretty much over 40+ cents. And then after that, we look at the highs going all the way back to 2021, which is up here around like almost 60 cents for HBAR. So again, we have a journey in front of us. But it is starting to ease up a bit with a lot of the recent announcements, especially with ETFs, which we are going to address. But let's start off this video with some of the updates around just overall development activity. So we have been keeping a close eye on dev activity because this is showing us and confirming that, yes, building is happening. We're starting to see some moves happening behind the scenes. And here we have from Sentiment. This goes back to October 20th. So I'm bringing this up because, again, I want to go back to October, and I also want to go back to the beginning of the month because it seems as though Hedera is constantly trending for dev activity. Over the last couple of days, it has come to my attention that we are now witnessing more and more users having money frozen on exchanges like MEXC. This is a big issue, and it's an issue that plagues the crypto space. It's at a time where these exchanges are not fully regulated. It's a big issue. This is why when I've always mentioned if you wanted to hold your crypto in custody, it could be cold storage. It doesn't matter where you are holding it. Never hold it on these exchanges. Now, I will say iTrust Capital does offer a premium custody account, which provides you institutional grade custody. This is a US-based company with live client service and support. And you can buy and sell crypto 24/7 on this platform, which is a closed loop system that is extremely secure with low fees. We could also see here that iTrust Capital does provide you with every single thing that you possibly need when you are buying, selling, or holding crypto on their platform. If you guys do want to sign up with a premium custody account today, you guys are more so welcome to do so through my link that is down in the description below. If you deposit $1,000, you get a $100 funding bonus on top of it. And with that being said, let's jump back on into the video. Here's our crypto's top RWAs by development. Directional indicators represent each project's ranking rise or fall since last month. And Hedera was number 2 here, and we could see it on the list here. Obviously, when we are looking at just dev activity, it could mean multiple things. It's all GitHub activity, which means there could be upgrades to the underlying, consensus. It could be the HCS service. It could be the HTS service. It doesn't matter, right? The main thing that we're looking at here is just the fact that we are starting to see more and more dev activity on these networks, and Hedera is one of them with over 200 plus activities from devs. And then also, we got another update on the 7th. Here are crypto's top 10 AI and big data projects by dev directional indicators representing each project's ranking positioning since last update. And HBAR is again number 2 with over 226 activities. And again, it's just showing us that we are constantly seeing Hedera rank high on these lists, which is telling us that there's a lot of dev activity happening for HBAR. And then more recently, this was on the 5th from Hedera. As per token terminal, Hedera has the second largest core developer pool across all layer 1s. And this is core developers. So this is just the actual developers that are working on these networks. Ethereum is number 1 with over 200 plus devs. And then, of course, Hedera is second with 129. So again, we have so many builders that are building, pushing updates as well around the ecosystem, which is very, very bullish. Now, let's talk about the supply of HBAR. Why do I say that the supply around HBAR is drying up? Why am I saying that this could potentially lead to a supply shock? Because again, there's 50 billion HBAR out there. And you might be thinking, well, Nick, you're crazy if you think a supply shock is going to happen for HBAR. If we're talking about Bitcoin, yeah, that's a lot more, that's a higher possibility because, again, there's only, 21 million Bitcoin, which will ever exist. So a supply shock is, most likely going to happen with Bitcoin. It's a lot more probable. But with Hedera, there's 50 billion HBAR, so there's no way it could happen, right? Well, I do think that this is where everyone is wrong, okay? I'm going off of the total supply. I'm not even going off of the circulating supply. 1% of the supply is already gone. How do we know? Because of the Canary Capital HBAR ETF. 387 million HBAR is locked in on this ETF alone. It's not exactly 1%, but it's getting close. We are a little bit under like 120 million HBAR that will be tied to this ETF, which will lead to 1% of the total supply being tied back to just one ETF. And this is holdings. I bring this up because, again, Canary Capital is not a massive name. It's not like BlackRock, okay? But over 387 million HBAR is already locked in on this ETF, which is the equivalent to almost $75 million. This is at a time where we just got another update. This is from Gilmore Estates. We have Hedera just surfaced in 2 new 21 shares ETF filings, the FTSE Crypto 10 Index, the TTOP, and FTSE Crypto 10X Bitcoin. This is TXBC. Both list HBAR as a permitted asset, signaling institutional interest even outside top market cap rankings. Quietly, Hedera is entering the ETF conversation. Now, this is also an added number to the 15 that were already there. Shout out to HBAR Tata for this. We have HBAR has well and truly entered the ETF era. 15 US ETF filings have now referenced Hedera, and the Canary HBAR ETF is already live on NASDAQ exchange. That single fund already holds nearly 1% of all HBAR. And we have another 15 here on top of the latest addition, which was Wisdom Tree. Okay, this is another basket with HBAR included. On top of that, we have the 221 shares, which I just went over. And we have from HBAR Tata, we have HBAR's inclusion in the basket ETFs is dependent on each specific fund and index, and in the majority of cases, the market cap ranking of HBAR when the fund goes live. By my estimations, HBAR will be included in 6 additional ETFs, worst case or 15 best case as it stands today. But it's crazy to look at these lists because we now have essentially, 18 ETFs around Hedera that are still waiting for approval. The first one already cornering almost 1% of the total supply. Let's just say all of these hit 1% of the total supply. You are at 19% of the supply of HBAR already gone. That is almost 20%. Think about how crazy that is. Now that's just off of 1%. What if all of them hit 2%? What if all of them hit 3, 4, 5%? Now you're starting to see the big picture here. In my bullish case for supply being locked up in some of these ETFs, I would argue that 3% would be, pretty conservative. We have right now 19 ETF applications. One of them is already live, which is included, right? That's Canary Capital. If 3% across the board becomes a reality, that's 57% of the supply of HBAR gone just in holdings for ETF issuers. I'm not even talking about retail, institutions, enterprises holding HBAR, locking up HBAR. I'm not even taking into account, treasury companies that want to hold HBAR as well. I mean, guys, this is where we start to see the big picture, form. This is where we potentially see a supply shock happen. We also got an update from Greg Bell. So we have the HBAR ETF continues to be a major crypto milestone for institutional adoption of Hedera. Now, this is with Paul Barron, where they did address this, and big shout out to CoinMan, the HBAR Barron. I've said it before, for store of value, there's Bitcoin. For everything else, there's HBAR. Watch this 2-minute clip from Gregory L. Bell's chat with Paul Barron, where Greg opines that the importance of Hedera ETFs means allocators are able to access the Web3 infrastructure layer. Check this out.
Got to compare the difference between a Bitcoin ETF, an Ethereum ETF, because you look at this right now, there's not a lot of ETFs out there that are actually solving some of the big challenges, okay, in terms of the products. For you guys, it's enterprise adoption, which is usually longer. It takes a lot longer for enterprise adoption to occur, but in the long run, it's more sustainable. So how does that apply for you guys in a future 5 years from now, where we're going to see blockchain everywhere? Where will Hedera be, and what do you think about the ETFs helping to solve, and what will it do for you guys?
So I think there are two sort of classes here. You have the digital gold narrative as it relates to Bitcoin and the Bitcoin ETF as a store of value. That is quite different from infrastructure. And Hedera is really very much a play at infrastructure that is enterprise grade and scalable. And so, as I look into a crystal ball, where do I think we'll be? I expect that there to be a pervasive adoption of the technology stacks as core infrastructure for a variety of different services. Certainly the financial markets is a big focus of ours, but enterprise, supply chain, AI, all of those are very valid and being adopted today. I would expect that the investor appetite to provide what looks like the picks and shovels for our industry is now more accessible to their portfolios. And so allocators are able to access the infrastructure layer. The market. Yes, I think that's really going to be the watershed moment that everybody's going to be looking at, when the infrastructure is so adopted that it's under the hood, that you don't have to be aware that it is being, that a good service is being run on Hedera.
It will the internet. The internet, same way.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I do agree with him. The main reason why ETFs have been so successful is because I feel as if, there's been a ton of players that are on the sidelines waiting for regulations to become a reality, waiting for them to, jump in. And again, all of those obstacles are now essentially getting removed, and ETFs are a huge way for them to get in earlier before we have the Clarity Act. But also, ETFs, the main reason why ETFs are so successful is also because retail doesn't want to touch some of these exchanges. I mean, you got to think about it like this. Retail has been hearing horror stories for years about how, there's so many criminals in crypto, and, you don't want to touch exchanges because of FTX. And again, it's just a big issue. So them jumping into the ETFs allows them to kind of have a safety net. It's also through names that people are aware of that they can trust as well. Like tomorrow, if a BlackRock HBAR ETF went live, I would argue that we would double the supply that's tied back to Canary in a very, very quick, fashion. And again, we're thinking about this in a sense of like, all right, if BlackRock does have an HBAR ETF or any big name, it could be Fidelity. It doesn't matter, right? If Canary's hitting nearly 1% here in a very short amount of time, I would argue that a lot of those players, if they had an HBAR ETF go live, we could easily see, I want to say 3 to 6%, 3 to 6% of the supply taken off of exchanges in a very, very quick manner. Because again, we're thinking about 3 to 4 weeks. All it would take is 3 to 4 weeks, and that supply would diminish greatly. And there is a lot of great names tied back to the HBAR ETF. So you got to remember that we have names like Wisdom Tree. Wisdom Tree is a well-known retail name. Also Grayscale. I mean, Rex Osprey is also not that bad either. Bitwise is a big one. So again, there's a lot of trustworthy names that people would, trust that would tap into these ETFs. And HBAR, I feel like, is now becoming a blue chip in the space that people are now taking notice to. So I'm very excited about the future here. I do think that the supply around HBAR is going to start to really kind of, diminish, just from retail buying, institutional players buying, enterprises lining up. Also, HBAR being locked up in liquidity pools around DeFi, institutional DeFi becoming a reality, and then also, of course, the ETF. So we're starting to see the supply being targeted not from one side or two sides, but, multiple sides that could accelerate the supply shock happening. So I'm very excited for the future here for HBAR, and it feels as if Wall Street is lining up at this point. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video.